Let's do this. Hello, Cleveland, and welcome back to another edition of the Dogland Podcast. Sorry we haven't put out an episode this week. Schedules get jacked up and everything, but it's Friday. We're here to preview the Bears, and Anthony's not with me, but joining me today. Browns fans should know him all too well through the podcast community. He is one of the co-hosts of the International Browns podcast with Paul Brown and Jack Duffin. And he's also a Chicago native. So who better to talk Browns and Bears, none other than Iain Wright. Iain, how you doing, brother?
I am good. For clarity, I'm a Lorain, Ohio native, Chicago transplant. So we moved out here 2017 for my wife's job, and I brought my Browns fandom to Chicago. But ironically enough, like, you know how when we're growing up with fans, we have like AFC teams and NFC teams. So when I was a kid, there was a guy who went to my high school who ended up playing for the Bears. He went to Ohio State, a guy by the name of Raymond Harris. So I used to watch the Bears back in like 94, 95 when Raymond was there. So I had my co-fandoms between the Browns and the Bears. And what's crazy is the parallels between the two organizations is just insane.
Yeah, we were just talking about it right before we hit the record button. And, you know, the Browns had the infamous QB jersey. And Iain, honestly, you look at the Bears QB history, even back to 99, just the same as the Browns when they came back as an expansion team. The list of starting quarterbacks they've gone through. Now, they had some better success with the Jay Cutler years and even the flash and pan with Josh McCown. But you look at all the other quarterbacks they had, it's very similar to the Browns history as well.
Yeah, they're a team that will reach in the draft for a quarterback here. Now, for a while, they believed kind of more in we're going to bring a veteran in, you know, to kind of go that route. But yeah, I mean, you're right. You're talking Shane Matthews's and Cade McNown's. I mean, Cordell Stewart was here for a little while. Kyle Orton, who can forget, you know, Purdue's finest Kyle Orton. I'm trying to think. You had
Craig Krenzel.
I remember. Yeah, Krenzel was out here for a hot second. Remember? Then we had the year of Matt Barkley. Matt Barkley was out here, started half a season for him, and then who can forget Mitch Trubisky, Ohio's finest? You know, he has been the public enemy number one in Chicago since after his rookie year. So it's kind of crazy. You know, back in college, a lot of the guys I knew in college, some Buckeyes like you said, Krenzel, and I remember half of my biology class ended up playing for the Bears. You had Kirk Barton, Marcus Freeman, Dane Sanzenbacher, all those guys. They came out to Chicago to play. But Chicago's an awesome city. I try to describe it to people and say, I lived in Columbus for 17 years. Chicago is Columbus with 9 million people. The restaurants are fantastic. Bears fans are Browns fans. I mean, we are the same breed of people. So it's kind of great for us in terms of this week. There's a lot of history. I remember a few years ago, the Browns were up big, and then Peanut Tillman ends up punching a ball out, creating a fumble. Bears come back, win one late. So a lot of history between the two teams, kind of two of the more iconic franchises in the NFL. And hey, like I said, as we go through this, you're going to be amazed that Browns fans will be like, man, that really sounds like the Browns, what they're doing. And wait to hear how many Browns former employees. Last week we had the Houston Texans players that were all Cleveland Browns. Wait to hear how many coaches you're familiar with.
Yeah, without question. The hot topic of the week, though, Iain, Justin Fields finally making his first NFL start. There was the banter all throughout training camp in the offseason, like how long was Andy Dalton going to be the starter? And Matt Nagy pretty much has gone on with the implementation of, I think he was treating this the way Andy Reid treated Patrick Mahomes his rookie year. I think he was going to start Dalton throughout the entire season for the most part, and then maybe towards the end, if they were out of contention, then you put Fields in. But obviously Dalton's injured this week, so Justin Fields gets the start. Based on what you've seen so far, being a Chicago guy, you're native right now. You got to see Fields a lot more than most of us have gotten to see him. How do you think he has come along so far as a rookie in this league?
I think you nailed it with what Nagy wanted. And here's why. Okay. Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, the GM, are on the hot seat, right? And they need to win now, right? Coaches, I think you'll notice this on Browns Twitter and in Browns fandom as well. You'll always have a dichotomy between fans that want to do what they think is best for the future versus how do we win games now, right? So you got to remember, Matt Nagy came up through the Andy Reid, Doug Peterson thing. So it's all, you're talking about RPOs, you're talking about quick passes, those type of things. Well, Mitch Trubisky was drafted by John Fox. So Mitch was never Matt Nagy's quarterback, but you invested so much capital in him. And we'll talk a little bit about that with the, why Ryan Pace is on the hot seat. But ultimately, they go out and they say, you know what, we're going to get Fields. And Fields is a guy who comes from a very quarterback-friendly offense at Ohio State with Ryan Day. And a lot of people either have mixed feelings on Ryan Day. He's such a good coach in college. How ready are his guys for the NFL? Because at Ohio State, I watched every game. They schemed. I mean, Brian Hartline had those receivers running wide open. And let's be honest, Fields' receivers at Ohio State with Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, they're better than what he has in Chicago. And that's the crazy part. So they get Fields. There's all this hype. He comes in. But Dalton is by far the better quarterback. He is the quarterback that gives them the best chance to win. And if you watch last week against the Bengals, they come out, scripted first drive. Dalton leads them right down the field. I mean, bing, bang, boom, boom, passing, running the ball, nice mix, and they finish it off with a touchdown. So you have this fan base now that sees that and goes, yeah, but I don't like Dalton. Dalton's not the future. Justin Fields is. So remember when the Browns had Deshaun Kaiser, you bring him in, you say, hey, let's just throw him to the wolves. Let's have him play now and see what happens. And it ends up ruining the guy, right? The Bears offensive line sucks. So you bring in Fields, and this is a guy who has incredible talent. He's a great athlete. This is a guy that can run. He has a great arm. He can throw the ball. There's just certain things about his game that hasn't translated to the NFL, because let's not forget, he's only thrown 15 passes in the NFL. 12 of them came last week after Dalton left with injury. But in that, 15 passes, you're talking about this guy throws for 60 yards and an interception and was sacked twice. So I like Justin Fields, but he's got some more developing to go. I told Bears fans, out here, this is one of those things where you divide the seasons into quarters. Play the 4 games with Dalton, see where you're at. If you're 2-2, 3-1, ride it out. If you're 1-3, 0-4, okay, now you got to start looking to transition to Fields.
And you mentioned, Nagy and Pace, they're obviously on the hot seat. Do you think, obviously coming in this year is kind of a make or break year. Do you think the selection of Fields bought them an extra year, or do you think regardless of how it plays out, I mean, obviously if Fields becomes, hot and they're on fire, they're obviously going to get more time. But if they see struggles and obviously the losing piles up, do you think they, blow it up and then find a new head coach and GM to pair with Fields, or how do you think that situation unfolds?
So I think it really comes down to Fields' development, because the Bears have already shown, I mean, John Fox in 2017 drafts Mitch Trubisky. Obviously Ryan Pace, the GM, was brought in 2015. He was with the Saints for 14 years, but it was the trade forward to Trubisky that put him on the hot seat. So if you remember right, the Bears gave up 2/3 and a 4th to move up one spot. Well, fast forward, that 3rd round pick they gave up that year went from San Francisco to New Orleans, turned into Alvin Kamara. And then the following year, the 4th round pick, San Francisco uses it on Fred Warner. So in the trade, the Saints get their guy, the Niners get their guy. Now I forget, there was another guy that was a safety, Tedrick Thompson, I think, was in as well. But the Bears got Mitch. So they say, you know what? We're not seeing enough out of Mitch. We're going to bring in Nagy. Nagy comes in 2018, coach of the year. I think a lot of people forget they won the NFC North in 2018, and they were a Cody Parkey tipped double doink away from making it, past the Eagles, who, remember, right, that's who won the Super Bowl. So it was one of those things where Nagy comes in, he has all this praise, all this is going on, and then it's just, he's gone to the Jeff Fisher years. Now we've gone 8-8 the last 2 years. So if Fields is progressing as the season goes along and they're seeing more out of him, there's a chance it may have bought him another year. But at the end of the day, if this team finishes 6-11 or, 7-10, and it's not looking great, I wouldn't be surprised if they clean house. Now, Virginia McCaskill, the owner of the Bears, she's a very prideful woman. And a great story about her once is, if you remember Dick Duran, former coach of the Bears, former Browns defensive coordinator, she really liked him and refused to fire him for 2 extra seasons because they went to the same church. So there's very unique things about her and how she runs her team. So I think that the answer to that question is strongly going to be dictated on what does Justin Fields do from at this point now to the end of the season. And Matt Nagy has left it open that if Dalton comes back and he's healthy, he's going to start.
So, You mentioned the offensive line, and as we break down the Bears offense, you look at the PFF grades, their offensive line is not that good outside of Jason Peters. It is one of the worst. I mean, most of the guys are ranked towards the bottom of each of their position groups, except Peters, who he's been in the league for a long damn time, and he's still
older
rated,
than me.
He's
39.
He's pushing 40, and he's still one of the top 10 tackles in football, according to PFF. So, I mean, that was obviously a huge get for them to bring him in, leaving Philly, but the rest of that offensive line is very shaky. And, the Browns defensive front hasn't been as what we thought it was going to be starting out, but this is a chance this weekend where the Clowney and Garrett and the rest of those guys can really tee off and disrupt Justin Fields' first start. I mean, offensive line's in for a tough task.
Yeah. So the Bears offense obviously said we're talking about an RPO offense. Well, the lifeblood of their offense and the savior to their offensive line is their running game. And what's crazy is when you look at, say, a guy like David Montgomery, right? So Montgomery has been the lifeblood to their offense the first 2 weeks. I mean, he ran well against the Rams in week 1. This guy's averaging 4.7 yards a carry behind, like you just mentioned, that awful offensive line. So you're like, Montgomery is coming into his own. His first year, he was a little unsure, but now, so they're a gap blocking scheme, which basically means, I'm not sure how technical some of the people are. The Browns run zone, right? So the running backs kind of search across looking for the gap that they're going to hit. The Bears, when it's blocked up with a gap scheme, Juan Castillo, their offensive line coach, basically says, you're hitting the B gap, you're hitting the A gap, you're going outside, right? They do sprinkle in a little elements of zone every once in a while, but for the most part, you're talking about a gap blocking scheme. Well, the Bears went out and said, all right, we're going to get Fields in the first round. We're going to go out and get our tackle in the second round. So they go out and draft Tevin Jenkins, the kid from Oklahoma State. And they're thinking, all right. And to be fair, I remember, many people may know my wife's a Steelers fan. And the one guy I didn't want them to get was Tevin Jenkins, because he's a tough, mean SOB. Now he looks like a guy that, would be an altar boy, but on the field, he's just a mean SOB. Well, he had a little bit of a lingering back issue. And then couple weeks into camp, they're like, oh, he's got a nerve issue, back surgery, out. So now he's on IR. And Bears fans are like, you got to be kidding me. How do you draft a guy with a bad back? He's 20-something years old. So now at this point, the makeshift offensive line is starting to come together. And, Kyle Long retired a couple years ago. Now he came back and he's hurt. But they call up Jason Peters, the former tight end, now converted offensive tackle, and say, hey, we need you, buddy. And he was a little banged up in week 1, but did play all the snaps in week 2. But they drafted Cody Whitehair, the guard out of Kansas State, and James Daniels, the center/guard out of Iowa. And these are top 100 picks, and they're awful. They can't pull. They get blown off the ball. I mean, it's not good in the run scheme. It's not good in the pass scheme as well. And then, I've watched probably at this point 28 of the teams in the NFL. I haven't found many centers that are worse than Sam Mustipher. I mean, this guy is just struggling right now. Now, to be fair, week 1 was against Aaron Donald, so I can't kill him too much. And actually, what's crazy is last week, Larry Ogunjobi just ate his lunch. And I mean, it's crazy. We used to talk with Jack and Duffin and the boys on the other side about Larry Ogunjobi would have like an insanely good game, and then he'd disappear for 3 weeks. Well, he killed Sam Mustipher last week. So, they go out and get Seahawks retread Jermaine Ifedi and put him out on the right side. He's been halfway decent in the pass game, but in terms of, his ability to block for David Montgomery, it's been pretty bad. But just to give you an idea of how inept this offense is, and it starts from that O-line. Obviously, Fields runs to save his life. Last week, the Bears defense created turnovers on 4 straight possessions. They got a fumble, they won a pick 6, and then they had 2 interceptions. How many total yards do you think they had after all 4 of those things, less the pick 6? Total offense.
I'm going to put, let's say 125.
50 yards.
Yeah.
50 yards total.
Wow.
After 4 turnovers, now obviously the pick 6 we'll take out of it. So we'll say for 3 turnovers, they had 50 total yards. On one, it was like -3, and they kicked the field goal because they had the ball inside the 10. So to your point about the Browns defense, this is one where I know fans are, we watched the Carolina game last night. They're like, look what happens when you blitz a rookie quarterback. The Browns defense at this point just hasn't been all that creative, because you can tell the communication's not there. And I know, you and Jack and Paul and I, we've all talked about the Browns defense being so new. There's not a lot of communication. I mean, you look back there and Ward's checking things off and John Johnson's in, all of a sudden people are switching green helmets with the fact that, you got Anthony Walker going out, and now Malcolm Smith was out for a few plays. So yes, the Browns defense at this point is very vanilla, but against the Bears offense, you may just be able to put a hat on a hat and rush 4 and drop 7 and see what you can do. And then all of a sudden, if you want to maybe throw in a little bit of a JOK blitz, or you want to, stir up something from the secondary, heck, maybe bring Ronnie Harrison, something from the safeties of the corners, I think you'll be able to get home. The Bears defense, the Bears offensive line right now is just, you stop them and you contain Fields. And I think we know how this game is going to go.
Yeah, without question. But I mean, you look, the Bears skill position they're not weak when it comes to talent. There's tons of talent on that side. I mean, David Montgomery, Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, who's injured right now. He might be questionable going into Sunday. Cole Kmet was a high draft choice at, I think, at Notre Dame.
Second round pick out of Notre Dame.
Yeah. And then they still got Jimmy Graham, who's still chugging along at 35 years old. And they even have
only see him in the red zone.
Marquise Goodwin, who's still got some speed. Obviously, he's got Olympic track speed, much like our guy, Anthony Schwartz. I mean, if Fields can get the ball out quickly, some of these guys can do some damage on the Browns defense, which has struggled at points so far early this season.
Yeah. The one thing you're going to notice is that is one of the knock on Fields right now is at Ohio State.
He held the ball.
Get rid of the ball 3.5 seconds, right? Yeah. Because it's a different game. So I think a lot of people forget that when quarterbacks are going through this, because he didn't play much at Georgia. So he comes to Ohio State, he figures this out. He's got 3 seconds, 3.5. In the NFL, you're done. But you're right. Allen Robinson, he's been off to a little bit of a shaky. So he's kind of in contract. Like that's what's pretty much going on around him, because he's been playing under the franchise tag. The Bears wanted to sign long-term. He doesn't want to sign long-term. He's probably their best possession receiver. But to your point about Mooney and Goodwin, so Goodwin obviously was the fastest man in the NFL. He won the contest. These are guys that are just speed guys. So I've got speed guys, but now Mooney's becoming their best receiver in terms of he's developing an intermediate game. If you remember backup Chiefs running back Damian Williams, he's their backup running back. He's not a threat in the run game. He's a threat in the pass game. So if you look for him, he's kind of in that Jamel White third down type of role where you're going to see him mainly out of the backfield. That's where he's going to be most dangerous. But at one point last year, the Bears had 10 tight ends at some point, like on their 90 man. It was absolutely insane.
I remember.
Yeah, Kmet is their best pass catching. And then Jimmy Graham, you'll see him in the red zone. You're not going to see him between the 20s. He's just like, you know what, coach, when you need a jump ball, I'm your guy. You'll see JP Holtz is in there, former Browns. I think he was a practice squad guy for us. He comes in there to block. He's more than a run block kind of guy. But yeah, I mean, just to give you an idea, the Bears leading receiver right now, Darnell Mooney, has 11 catches for 92 yards in 2 games. So this isn't exactly a potent offense in terms of how much they're turning around with their wide receivers, but they do have talent. And if we have a breakdown in the secondary, you're going to see Marquise Goodwin. You're going to see Darnell Mooney fly right past you.
Without question. The Bears defense, I mean, it don't matter what era it's been, the last 40 years, it's been their constant, their defense. You think back to the 85 Bears, the last time they went to the Super Bowl in 06, I think it was, their defense was strong. Their defense is still strong now, obviously. I mean, got Khalil Mack, Roquan Smith, Jaylen Johnson's coming on as I think he's a second-year player, rookie, or
he's a second-year player. Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, they got talent on that side of the ball, and that's obviously what has kept them in games early on this season. Whether it was against the Rams or even last week, you said 4 straight turnovers against the Bengals. Like their defense still brings it. They're obviously giving up 25.5 per game early on this year. Obviously, it's only 2 games in, but their defense is what's going to keep them in games all season, Ian.
Yeah. The Bears defense is the staple of the fandom, right? So they definitely pride themselves on the defense, in the mighty Bears. And, to be fair, over the years, they've traditionally always had a good defense. Now, I would say that on paper, the Bengals made this defense seem maybe a little bit more worrisome than it actually is. So when you actually look at this Bears defense, it's not quite your traditional Bears defense. So over the offseason, Chuck Pagano retires, Colts coach who ended up overcoming, was it leukemia or?
Yeah.
I think he overcame a leukemia. So they bring in a new defensive coordinator, Sean Desai. Bears run a 3-4. So in essence, you've got a couple big guys in the middle, and then the staples of their defense are the outside pass rushers. But Akeem Hicks, who is their big man in the middle, he's in a contract year. also battling, like we talked about, he's got a little knee thing. It's kind of the treader knee. And then he's got a little bit of stomach bug, AKA we don't make him practice during the week. I would be shocked if you don't see Akeem Hicks out there. He's really their most versatile lineman. I mean, this is a guy that'll shade the B gap. So you're talking about lining him up between like Batonio and Wills, or they'll shift him a little bit maybe to the other side. So you'll see him against like Teller or Conklin. So the other guys in there, there's Bilal Nichols is a guy, he's kind of a space eater. And then Angelo Blackson's the other guy. These are guys that really you're not going to write home about. Their job is to really just make messes in the middle. So as you mentioned, Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn on the outside, these are the guys that they want to bring the pressure. Their third pass rusher, Jeremiah Tachu, former second round pick, I think with the Chargers, is now there. He's been halfway decent in the role they're looking for him. This is a one where the Bears will try to use a little bit of an exotic blitz in terms of how they're going to try to get pressure on the quarterback. But I think in terms of stressing the Browns offensive line, having Mack on one side, and Mack isn't what we remember him to be. I mean, a lot of people have seen games with Khalil Mack where you're just like, you're terrified of him. He's still effective. Like, you still need to block Khalil Mack. Let's not kid ourselves. But also you think about it, Jedrick Wills with the ankle and then Conklin with the knee, our offensive tackles right now we're battling injuries. So this is a point where we're going to test to see how healthy these guys are, because if they're not 100%, I'll be curious to see how the Bears defense is going to attack the Browns on the edge. Because if the Browns really want to try to make way in the run game, you're going to have to block those edges. Right. And if all of a sudden we're trying to run a zone run to the outside or anything like that, and we're getting penetration from the outsides, it's going to blow up the offense.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the secondary, because I mentioned Jaylen Johnson. He's having a great year so far, second-rated corner according to PFF. But then the rest of that secondary, Eddie Jackson struggling early on, Tayshaun Gibson, former Brown, he's struggling early on, and then
Oh, you're talking about my Kendall Vildor.
Vildor, yeah,
Kendall
he's struggling
Vildor
as well. I mean, it's just obviously the Browns receiving core lost Jarvis Landry, but all signs are pointing to Odell Beckham making his return in his debut this season. So talk about how this secondary might go up against our Browns passing attack on Sunday.
Yeah. So the Bears at each level of the defense have a guy you got to look out for. Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack, and actually Robert Quinn. They're both pretty effective. And then also you have Roquan Smith. But in the secondary, it's Jaylen Johnson. So Jaylen Johnson, second round pick last year, comes in. He struggled last year, but he's been by far their best cornerback on the field. I mean, he played fantastic against Cincinnati. So what you're going to see out of the Bears secondary, you're seeing a cover two. So they're going to run basically Gibson and Eddie Jackson deep, and then they'll roll them into single high at some point like that. So as you remember, Tayshaun Gibson was kind of the ball hawk with us when he was with Cleveland. So Jaylen Johnson, I think on the season's allowing like a 40% completion. I mean, this is a guy that has an interception last week, 2 pass breakups. So he is by far their cornerback number 1. And then it's a drop off, right? So you're talking about second year corner, Kendall Vildor. He's still learning. I mean, he's definitely not made the same progression that Jaylen Johnson has in terms of his second year. Their nickel cornerback, Duke Shelley, and then Marquis Christian are the other guys that they bring in. That's where you're going to be able to move the ball. So the Browns, I have faith that, Kevin Stefanski and Alex Van Pelt and the boys will be able to say, all right, I've got one good corner, and they'll probably predominantly run man on him. Sometimes you'll see some zone schemes behind him, but I don't think they're going to struggle to move the ball against the other guys. Tayshaun Gibson and Eddie Jackson, anybody who watched Sunday Night Football have seen that they are struggling with the same communication issues that our safeties are. It's just one of those things where, all of a sudden you get a guy like Anthony Schwartz or even Odell, who I think, you're probably looking at limited snaps for Odell. These guys should be able to maybe hit a big play. Eddie Jackson, he kind of still lives off his reputation. He went to Alabama, so everybody loves him from that. And if you remember, I think he went to the Pro Bowl in like 2018, his second season, was one of the highest graded safeties in the league. He has completely regressed since then. So I see the Browns definitely using a stretch concept to get those guys open deep, and then letting the linebackers Alec Ogletree they brought in for free agency, and Roquan Smith is great against the run. In the past, he did have the pick six. But if we're stretching this defense deep and we're pushing that secondary back, those cover two guys, even if they roll in a single high, you're going to see David Njoku. You're going to see Austin Hooper. You're going to see Harrison Bryant. The middle of the field is going to be wide open. I don't know if you watched the Texans-Panthers game last night. Aikman and Buck kept pointing out how in that cover two, the Texans were just leaving that giant void in the middle of the field, which the Browns exploited, before Donovan Peoples-Jones fumbled away the ball. But yeah, so I definitely think this could be a game where the Browns exploit that middle of the field just underneath that cover two. And the minute they roll one of these guys up, we're going over the top.
Absolutely. You did mention that to me that there is a lot of former Browns coaches on this coaching staff, and I pulled it up. There's even a couple former players. Mike Adams, assistant defensive backs coach.
I got the list.
Go ahead, run them off.
We got Chris Tabor, our favorite, the special teams coach.
Our favorite special teams coach.
Yeah, former, as you mentioned, former Browns defensive back Mike Adams is out here, and and to be fair, I've met Mike a couple times. He's a really good dude. Yeah. So
he was a great dude when he was here.
Yeah, he was a really good guy. So I'm happy to see him around there. Who can forget our guy Flip, John DeFilippo? He is the pass game quarterbacks coach. And I will tell you, I won't use the player's name that told me this, but I was chatting with a guy once, and this would have been, I'm trying to think if Flip was actually our coach at the time. He may have said it during Flip's time here. He goes, I wouldn't let Flip coach my my kids' peewee football team.
Honest take right here. When we fired Hugh Jackson and they were starting to list off the candidates, like the number one guy, I was like, go get Flip. I said he'd make Johnny look decent as the offensive coordinator, but he fell off really quick after that.
I will just tell you, it's an offensive player. I'll tell you afterwards who it is, but I remember I was talking to him and he's just like, dude, I seriously wouldn't hire that guy to coach my kids' flag football team. And it's just because it was this team where you just didn't have a lot, and he was just not a good mix. I know he went to Philly, and I'm sure he's a really nice guy.
Well, that's why he got the recognition, because of the Philly run too.
And then he was up in Minnesota. But another guy who I love, and ironically enough, I have a connection to him out here in Chicago, former Browns wide receiver Mike Furry.
I remember him too.
Mike Fury. He's their wide receivers coach. Just an overall good dude. I like Mike a lot. And then who can forget my guy? I'm still a fan of this guy. Always will be. Just a great dude. Browns head coach Mike Pettin is a senior defensive assistant for the Bears. Listen, say what you want about Pet. He is an absolute great dude. His daughter Megan was down at Ohio State for a little while. But yeah, Mike's a good dude. He's out here in the Bears, just helping them out with their offense. Remember, he was with the Packers. I'm sure it's pretty much an advisory type of role. But yeah, a lot of former players, a lot of former coaches. I know it's kind of crazy. We talk about even Matt Nagy. So Matt Nagy has ties. He was a quarterback for the Columbus Destroyers down there in kind of your 07-08 season. And, it's one of those things where you just got this Bears fan base, and they're just so rabid. They want to be good. They hate the Steelers or the Packers as much as we hate the Steelers. Right. Yeah. And to see Rodgers and Favre just continue to do it to them, all these years, it festers this dislike. Right. And Kevin Stefanski in his first year wins coach of the year. Matt Nagy in his first year wins coach of the year. Cody Parkey, the double doink. It's like all the ways they could lose games. The Browns fans are like, yep, been there, seen that, done that, and this was a guy, he came up. So Nagy, he was in Philly, or he tried to play in the NFL, then went to the Arena Football League, goes to Philly as a coaching intern under Andy Reid. Right. And at the time, actually a funny story is, the Eagles tried to sign him from the coaching staff to play, and the league blocked it after one practice. Was like, no, you can't do that. So he gets on the coattails of Doug Peterson, rides through Philly there, gets brought over to Kansas City when Reed goes over there. But he played college ball at Delaware with Brett Veach, the current GM of the Chiefs. So this is a guy that used his connections. Doug Peterson goes from Kansas City to Philly, obviously wins the Super Bowl as a coach there. Reed brings him up as an offensive coordinator. He actually let him call plays. That's the crazy part when Alex Smith was there. So that's why Bears fans were so excited. This guy comes in, and it's just been crazy ever since then that Nagy has just not had the same luster. Because when I first moved here, 2017, Matt Nagy could have had a parade down Michigan Avenue and half the city would have shown up. And it's very similar. And I'm not saying that Stefanski is going to follow the same path, but, Bears fans fell in love with Matt Nagy as fast as Browns fans have fallen in love with Kevin Stefanski. So it's just a wild thing to see. And I I just think he's probably going to end up getting axed. I think this is going to become a Fields development year. And, in terms of the game this week against the Browns, I can't see how the Bears even, I know the spread's 7, and I don't know if you see social media. So Barstool Sportsbook is running a promotion where if you drive all the way out to the middle of hell nowhere, which is the Aurora Casino, they will give you the Bears +7 at a betting rate of +1985. So if you bet $100, you'll win $1,985. I don't think they're going to be paying that out. I dabble a little bit in the gambling thing, but Justin Fields' passer rating against the pressure is 16.7. I think Joe Woods knows this, so I wouldn't be shocked if the Browns fans get a little bit of what they're looking for this week in terms of some creativity. I think the Browns win this by over a touchdown. I think if you look at so PFF has that stat, the turnover worthy plays. Did you see the percentage?
No, not yet.
It's almost 10%. Almost 10% of the Bears plays are turnover worthy plays. So provided the Browns don't go full Chiefs mode and absolutely beat themselves and just leak down their leg, I don't think this one is going to be too close. I think if the Browns can get a couple early turnovers in the first half, this is one of those ones where I think we can maybe just rust comfortably, maybe get some Dearness Johnson carries in there, back off some of the starters. That's why I think maybe Odell is looking at 10 to 15 pass rep snaps. You could see guys like Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones, maybe Harrison Bryant, some of those kind of, we'll call them the second tier guys, really starting to make some way, because I don't think Bears fans aren't traveling to Cleveland, so it's going to be a complete home game for the Browns. So I think this is something they should just do. Get out in front, put this one away quick, and keep it easy on everybody else, because we know Baker still got a little bit of that lingering shoulder thing. So at this point, let's just get an easy win.
Yeah, without question, man. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
This is a battle. Most people don't know the Paul Brown Fantasy Football League. These are the two finalists, yes. And I lost to the shin kicking Josh Allen. And that my entire season of talking smack about the guy, and he puts up the number 1 points in fantasy football. So it's like I had to eat a whole table of crow on that one.
Wasn't just him. You mocked me for the Brady pick too. Like Tom Brady is just inhuman. Listen, he's going to play till he's 50 at this point.
All I did was I took LeBron's quote and said, "Father Time catches up to everybody." I didn't realize with this guy drinking the holy water, whatever the hell he's drinking, he's still doing it.
Whatever he's drinking, he gave it to Gronk, because the old Gronk's back too.
Yeah, I know. Did you watch the Peyton Manning Eli broadcast?
Yeah, a little bit.
So they asked Jay Cutler tweeted at Peyton Manning, was like, "What's in the cup?" And he goes, "Not TB12 water."
Love it.
Yeah, but no, it's kind of fun to be a Browns fan in a different city. It kind of gives you a little bit of perspective, and like I said, we've loved our time here in Chicago, and it's been kind of just ironic how many similarities the Browns and the Bears have had over the years. So all week at work, the guys, we're going to take you, we're going to come, we're going to do this. Oh, yeah. So, but no, it'll be a good game, I think, in the first half. And I think, unless they bring back the spirit of Jimmy Clausen to take some snaps, I think that this one could be over pretty quick.
Oh, another Bears quarterback from the past, Jimmy Clausen. Oh God,
he's the one I forgot. I made a note. I was like, I got to get a Jimmy Clausen plug in here before we shut it down for the day.
The Notre Dame fans will appreciate it.
I'm dropping things all over. See, we started talking about Jimmy Clausen. Think about the NIL deals he'd have had, man. He'd have been Jimmy question. Football. Oh, he'd have probably made more money from NIL deals than he ever did in the NFL.
Absolutely, because he didn't last long in the league. You guys can follow Ian on Twitter at IAIN19.
Yep, Ian19, the Scottish Irish way that nobody knows how to spell.
Without question. And also check him out on the International Browns podcast with Paul and Jack. He always brings great insight, and you get to hear his little battles with him and Duffin every once in a while. So I love it.
I love it when you and Duffin go at it. That's always a good time as well. So I know Jack loves coming on here as well. So it's a pleasure to come on, contribute. We all take care of each other in this community. So
yes, we do. You guys can follow me on Twitter at JackMcCurry08. We'll be back Sunday evening to recap Browns Bears. Anthony will be at the game, so we'll get some great insight from him. Until next time, Browns fans, go Browns.
Go Browns.